Today, we're crafting the perfect jewelry display. This display is both functional and a piece of art. So grab your tools and let's start this wood story.
To start off this project, you're going to need a piece of wood that's approximately 80 centimeters long. The width is much more flexible. I'm using a piece that's about 10 centimeters wide, but you can get away with a little bit bigger or even a little bit smaller. And if you're the type of person who prefers to have the plans in your hands while we're building this, then go ahead down in the description where I provided the link to the digital plans.
In order to make this jewelry display, we're going to need two pieces that go like this. And they're going to connect with a 30-degree angle. This piece right here will end up being a little bit longer than this piece. Let's call this A and B. We want our longest piece to be 40 centimeters. Now, in order to find out what this one should be, we have to take our 40 centimeters minus
the thickness of our wood,
which in my case was 1.8 centimeters. And whatever that turns out to be, that will be our measurement for A and for B. Now, one more thing. We're going to cut this on its side. And when we get over to the miter saw, we're going to have pieces that are going to look like this. The angles are going to go out here, and the angles are going to go out here. We are going to be measuring from our longest side, this to here. That is our measurement in both cases.
So now that you have the measurements that you need to cut your two pieces, you can go on over to the miter saw and cut those with a 30-degree angle on both. For the bottom piece, I'm going to router 2 holes, which will be a great pocket for small pieces of jewelry that can't hang. I'm simply making a mark in the middle in order to center each of the circles. I am using a router template from a past wine rack project that I made. You can use any round router template. Just make sure that you leave about 1/2 inch on each side so that you have enough space to drill in some holes in the bottom later on. You'll see what I mean very soon. For the router bit, I'm using a 1/2 inch bowl bit, and I'm routering out about 5/8 of an inch. This of course depends on the thickness of your wood, but 5/8 fit my piece. When you're using a handheld router, you always want to go clockwise against the inside of the template. If you were routering the outside of the circle, you would be going counterclockwise. So just keep that in mind as you start out. Once you've made your first initial passes, you can go over the whole thing. With both circles routered, I switched to the side piece of the triangle to make 4 marks, which will be where the metal bars are going to stick through. I spaced these out equally, making sure not to have the top hole be any closer than 1.5 inches from the top. All of these holes are also centered to the wood. At the time of this video, I did not own a drill press, so I had to figure out how to accurately drill angled holes that will allow the metal pieces to sit vertical to the bottom piece. This required a carpenter square, and I marked out the angle to have a visual reference. To use a carpenter square, you first need to line up the tall side against your workpiece. Then, making sure you still have full contact with the wood at the top, you slide the carpenter square until you reach the angle you want. This was 15 degrees for this project. You then make your mark, and now you have the right angle.
For those of you, myself including, who does not have a drill press, when we're drilling these angles, it can be quite tricky. So the way to get around that is first we made our marks, then use some sort of a clamp so that you can angle it and make sure that it's really secure. Then by using a indicator, something that'll show you what the angle is, put that on until you get your 30-degree angle. Now, you will notice that mine is, 30.45. I have played around with this. So as long as it's within 1 degree, you're going to be just fine for doing this. Okay? So don't stress too much if it's 30 or closer to 31 or even 29. So when we're drilling our hole, we want to make sure that our drill is completely straight as we do this. And you can absolutely hold it and just be really careful. I've just taped on this quick leveling thing so that I can stay as close to the bubble as possible as I go through. That way I know that everything will stay level in both directions.
And just proceed with the rest of the holes. Just double check each hole as you go along that it actually fits through. We are going to add in these little hooks. These will be on the underside of the jewelry, which will have necklaces hanging from them when it is done. So this is actually the bottom side that you're looking at right now. So all I've done is I've traced a line pretty close to the edge all the way along, and then I've equally spaced out a whole bunch of holes. And depending on how big your hooks are, you can do more or less. I have done a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now I'm not putting it too close to the edge because we do have our triangle here and the same thing over here. But other than that, I've just measured it, divided the distance, and put these about 1.5 inch spaced apart. And then I'm just using a small little drill bit, and I have some painter's tape on there so that I don't go too far into the wood. And one thing to note is, if you did make the drilled out trays here, the wood is pretty thin here. So we definitely don't want to have anything that's going to be in this area. So you really need to have your hooks pretty close to the edge here, but on the other side. Otherwise, the hooks are going to go through and they're going to show through this little catching tray here. And we don't want to have that happen. So my plan here is that I'm going to have them all the way along here and all the way along here, which is why my line is so close to the edge to avoid that. We're going to assemble the triangle now. We're going to take extra care to make sure that the holes are facing the right way, because if you ended up doing it like this, then your poles would be going the wrong way. So make sure that they end up being vertical to this piece once it's all glued up. So I'm going to add glue right here, and then I'm going to connect it right here. And then I'm going to use this little handy homemade 30 angle jig in order to keep it secure while it is being glued up. And we're also going to use gravity. Once the jig is on, I'm going to put it upright like this, and then I'm going to just use gravity in order to give a little bit of pressure. You don't need to use a lot of pressure. You just want to make sure that your joints are held tight while this is going on. If you do not have a handy jig like this, then I'm going to link right here to this timestamp in another video where I will show you how you can make your own jig. Super simple. So we're going to take the jig, we're going to put it in, we're going to add this piece, we're going to put it in, and then this piece is going to go in like that. However, if I just did this right now, because this jig is not very thick, I would only be putting a lot of pressure on the bottom side, and I really want to add pressure around the middle point. So I'm just using these little blocks that I have. You could use a scrap piece of wood, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to use that to lift it up. And the same thing on the other side, I'm going to put one on each side right here in order to lift up the jig. And that's going to just help it stay so that when I'm ready to put my pressure on, that it will all stay in place like that. And once your jig is on, you can put it up on the table to allow gravity to put enough pressure so that the joints are nice and tight. Once the glue is fully dry, ideally 24 hours later to avoid stressing the joints, I recommend adding 2 dowels. I am drilling these dowel holes directly into both pieces of wood at the same time. And that's because it would have been tricky to use a doweling tool prior with these odd angles. But now that we have a straight edge again and the pieces have been attached to each other again, I can use the tool and drill these 2 holes at the same time. I then insert my dowel with some glue and cut them with a saw once dry. Before moving on to the finish, make sure that you sand off any of the glue that may have spilled out. You may also want to use a chisel for the hard to reach areas. I am using tung oil as my finish, but you can use any finish that you prefer, as long as it's something that can handle a good amount of wear and tear. After applying multiple coats and drying fully, I am adding the hanging hardware. And then I am twisting in the 18 little hooks in the bottom that will be the necklaces to hang off of. I recommend getting these little hooks started by hand and then using a small screw to twist them in the rest of the way. Make sure they all face the same direction when done. The trickiest part of this display is aligning the vertical metal bars. Start by adding them all in, then use a flat square or a piece of straight wood to align both sides to where you want them. The idea here is that they are sticking out less on the left side and more on the right side. Don't worry if your bars are a little crooked, we will fix that afterwards. Once they are all aligned, use a bit of CA glue and activator to secure the metal to the wood. You may want to do this one at a time and check the straightness again after each one has been fully glued, just in case they moved. Once the glue is fully dry for all 4 bars, you can gently bend the bars until they are completely vertical to the bottom piece. And just like that, this jewelry display is done and ready to be hanged or perhaps gifted away, as this would make the perfect gift for a woman in your life. I've made these for both of my daughters, and they both really love how it's functional, but also art on their walls that displays all of their jewelry and treasures. Thank you so much for watching. For more great gift ideas, check out these videos, and I'll see you soon in the next Wood Story.